today me, Karin, and David will talk to you about the environmental exposure pathways of asbestos, and me mainly will talk about airborne environmental exposure pathway. So let me make a little repetition and tell you what is asbestos. It's a group of minerals that occur naturally in the environment as bundles of fibers. These fibers are resistant to fire and chemicals, and this makes it very popular in various industrial branches. Despite its positive qualities, it can cause some asbestos-related diseases, which you can see here and about which we will be talking later. Our groupmate already talked about where is asbestos used, and it's mainly used before, in the past times, it was used in a lot of different branches of industry, but now there are less. And so there are main three environmental exposure pathways of asbestos. Those are inhalation, ingestion, and skin or dermal pathway. The most frequently and more important exposure pathway is the inhalation type. Fibers are released into the air by the disturbance of asbestos-containing materials. So during the product use, during the demolition works, during the repair or remodeling of the houses or buildings, or any disturbance of any kind of asbestos-containing materials, those fibers can be leaked into the air. There are main two types of asbestos exposure. The most dangerous and most frequently occurring one is occupational exposure, which occurs among the workers who are working in the factories and because of the not proper equipment mainly. Another type and less occurring is the community exposure, and I will talk about it later. So airborne occupational asbestos exposure. So according to Occupational Safety and Health Administration, a lot of people, you can see the number, 1.3 million boys are exposed to asbestos, and the long exposure of asbestos is increasing the risk of developing asbestos-related diseases. The main way of being exposed is when the raw material arrives to the factory and workers are working with the raw material without no special equipment, and those slides were shown before. Also painters in the houses are using those paints which contain the chemicals which are mixed with the asbestos, and the chemical fumes are inhaled. The workers are not using the inhalators and masks. Also the drywall panels, when cutting and or fastening those panels to the framework of the building, they can inhale the dust. And of course demolition work. There are a lot of other exposure ways of occupational, but these ones are the main one. Then I would like to present you a little movie about how can workers be exposed, which will make you better sense.
Asbestos is a fibrous mineral that's resistant to chemicals and heat, and very tough. It was also added to the building materials of many older homes. As a worker or homeowner, the hazard exists when undertaking a renovation or demolition. The danger is releasing the asbestos fibers into the air. When a worker breathes, asbestos fibers enter the mouth and nose and flow down the air passages deep into the lungs. The fibers lodge in the delicate lung tissue where oxygen is absorbed into the blood. Immune system cells try and break down the asbestos fibers and become damaged and die. Scar tissue forms around the dead cells and spreads as more fibers embed in the lungs. Asbestos fibers can remain in the lungs for long periods, and the scar tissue that results continues to develop for many years after exposure. Eventually, so much scar tissue develops that the lungs stop working. Since the year 2000, more workers have died from asbestos disease in BC than any other workplace injury. For information on how to protect yourself from asbestos
So, although the movie talked about health effects, also it still gave us a detailed impression of how workers can be exposed to the dust and inhaling asbestos, and that the use of the proper equipment is very important. Then I would like to talk about the community asbestos exposure. And although the asbestos containing materials are produced very rarely in the buildings, still in the houses that were built before 1970s, asbestos containing materials were used a lot. And those houses are at danger, and people living there are at danger. So the houses with the materials, people there can be exposed if the materials are getting loose, crumbled, or disturbed by the household activities. And another type of community asbestos exposure is a second-hand exposure, and it starts when the worker who is working with asbestos-containing material or raw asbestos material comes to home and he's covered with asbestos dust. At that time, he releases the asbestos fiber or dust into the air of the house, and the family members are getting exposed to it, although they don't have any direct communication with the factory or the material itself. And also from the worker's skin, hair, clothing, also during the laundry procedures, family members can be exposed. And the references, and thank you. Any questions?
Did you look at the workers' exposure who are working in the asbestos mines?
No, I didn't. But I think that they're also, of course. But I'm sure that they have in the more developed countries they're using the proper equipment probably more frequently than the demolition works and workers and others.
Okay. For example, if there is asbestos mine and some of your friends have shown the mine and the housing next to it, so the community members, what would be their pathway?
Oh, again, the dust from the mining place and will go to the community, and the community members can inhale it. So there is another pathway of developing the asbestos-related disease.
You also mentioned skin. Does it mean that the fibers can penetrate the skin?
They can, but about the dermal exposure, my other groupmates will talk more detailedly.
Okay.
Other question?
Okay, thank you.
So, do you know that you might have asbestos in the water that you're drinking?
So as we knew, the pathway for asbestos to reach our body is either through air or water or soil. And I will be talking about the pathway through water, the different ways that it will reach our bodies, the EPA regulation in water, the health effects that might affect when asbestos is swallowed, and about the asbestos water containing in water pipes in Armenia. So, how does asbestos reach water? One of the ways that it might reach is through water pipes that are made of asbestos cement. So whenever these pipes erode, they will allow asbestos to get into the water, and eventually we'll be drinking this water. Another way is through asbestos roofing. Whenever the roofing materials are made of asbestos cement, the asbestos will deteriorate during time, and it will allow asbestos to go through the air, and rain could come, and some people gather rainwater through rainwater tanks, and some people would drink this water or use it for irrigation. Another way for asbestos to reach water is through asbestos-containing minerals. So, as Sharita said, that crystallite is used for water pipes. It was also used for roofing, for roof materials as tremolite. And also other minerals are asmosite and chrysotolite, which were used for water pipes. Also, industrial waste might be a way for asbestos to reach to us through water, and that if the asbestos waste material is thrown in water, like air running water, surface running water, and if that water is drunk or used for irrigation, that might reach to our body. And a proof for that is Lake Sevan. It was found out that in 2002 that it contains asbestos. And I really don't know the pathway of Lake Sevan, if they really use it for drinking water. But if people use it for water, for drinking, they might be swallowing. Also, I found a really old literature for 1977 indicating that Lake Michigan at that time was containing asbestos too. Another assumption is that asbestos might reach through water to us is through plants. And that is if soil contains asbestos particles, and also if rain comes, the rainwater will drag the asbestos particles with it, and the plant will absorb it, and eventually will be eating these plants, and it will end up in our bodies. But again, an assumption is that as long as asbestos is fibrous, it might be hard for the plants to absorb it. Also, plants might absorb water through irrigation, which again, asbestos is fibrous, and eventually plants might not be absorbing it. Now, in 1974, Congress passed the Safe Drinking Water Act and asked EPA to set regulations for drinking water. So, according to EPA, according to their the best scientific evidence that they found, they set the goal, the maximum contaminant goal, which is the maximum level for asbestos to be present in water, and that it would be safe for us to swallow. It was 7 MFL, magnetic flux leakage, which is used for corrosion. And accordingly, they decided maximum contaminant level 7 million fiber per liter. Now, what if asbestos was ingested? Lots of studies have been done, a lot, and I know tomorrow they will be talking about it. But I will talk briefly. They found out that asbestos swallowed caused no harm, as long as it is according to the regulations, EPA regulations. Also, EPA said, found out that if a person is exposed for a long time for asbestos, I mean, if that person swallows asbestos for a long time, in level that is over its regulated level, which is more than 7 MFL, risk might be for developing benign intestinal polyps. And WHO also had guidelines for drinking water, and I'll quote this. Although well studied, there has been little convincing evidence of the carcinogenicity of ingested asbestos in epidemiological studies of populations with drinking water supplies containing high concentrations of asbestos. Moreover, in intensive studies in laboratory species, asbestos has not consistently increased the incidence of tumors of the gastrointestinal tract. There is therefore no consistent evidence that ingested asbestos is hazardous to health, and thus it was concluded that there was no need to establish a health-based guideline value for asbestos in drinking water. So even WHO found out that swallowed asbestos is not a major health hazard, so they decided not to put guidelines. Now, what if really asbestos contains in our water and we want to get rid of it? There are some ways. One of the ways is through coagulation filtration, which is a method that gets rid of contaminants, including asbestos, by precipitation. Another way is through direct and diatomite filtration, which uses diatomaceous earth, which is a specific particle with, they coat the filters with it so that it won't let particles like asbestos to go through the water. Another way is corrosion control, which is made by special instruments. Which is also for the water pipes, these are the water pipes. Now, water pipes in Armenia. Shogai was talking about the Garmirtal district in Varashen. They knew that in 1930 it was water pipes made of asbestos cement were placed in this district, and these water pipes were used for irrigation. So in 2011, Erevanjur stated that they changed all the pipes, so it's good news for that. And these are some photos about when they changed the pipes. And about the Lichk village, a human rights defender, Garen Andreasyan, wrote to Ecolur, stating that Lichk village in Sunik region contains water pipes made of asbestos cement, and the governor of Sunik, Suren Khachadurian, confirmed that these pipes are made of asbestos cement, and they knew that asbestos is harmful for health, and he promised that in June 2013 will be changed. And I looked through the net, and I found out that the governor kept his promise, and in 2013, 2.5 kilometer long section of asbestos was changed in Lichk region. So as a conclusion, asbestos might reach the water to our body, but if it's depending on the regulation of EPA, if it's lower than the level they said it's okay, it's not such harm for our body. And also, according to what I found, Armenia kind of knows it adverse health effects, and they're trying their best to at least change the water pipes, and now, as Sholev said, they are not using asbestos cement water pipes. They are using polyethylene floor, which is more safe and I think cheaper. Thanks for your attention. Questions?
Have you found any laboratory results about the level of asbestos in drinking water in Armenia?
Actually, no, and I think, as Margaret said, it's really expensive. Like, it's a specific procedure, and it's kind of expensive to do it. But hopefully, in the future, they will be. But I didn't find they didn't state anywhere. Yes.
So from the literature, based on what you have read, can the plants absorb
No, it
asbestos
wasn't
or
stated
not?
actually in the literature, but when I was talking to the professors, together we listed the assumptions that the ways that asbestos might reach to our bodies.
Mhm.
The other assumptions were proved, the ones that I stated, but the plant was not. I didn't find any literature writing about plants, but it was just an assumption I wanted to talk about, that it might be a way that might reach to our body.
You didn't find or you didn't check the literature, whether you can get it through food?
It wasn't written. Like, I didn't find it when I was searching about it.
Did Yerevan do have any toxicological data or any water data, what contains in the water?
Actually, the source that I found, I really had hard time finding all the sources that I found, but the source about Yerevan that I found, it was only stating the water pipes that they changed throughout Armenia, and they were talking about that specific village that they found that their water pipes were asbestos cement, and they changed it, but they didn't talk anything about the toxicology.
So there is no data about the quality of water that they
They,
supply.
I'm not sure, but I don't remember that they talked about it. Yes.
You mentioned that WHO did not find enough evidence to suggest regulation for asbestos in water, but the US has a regulation. Do you know, based on what studies the US came up with this kind of regulation?
The studies I didn't find out, but it was just stating that EPA stated its regulation, MCLG regulation, according to the scientific evidence that they found. But I didn't find any other evidence about it.
I mean, I would suggest that you find their references because it might be useful information. If they, no, EPA. If they came up with a recommendation, it means that they had some evidence about asbestos in water. And I don't know, like 7 million per liter sounds a lot. You have a clue if that's a lot or no? Okay. Thank you.
First of all, I want to answer the question about the plant, if the plants can absorb the asbestos or not, because I'm also going to talk about that. Also I, as Kani said, couldn't find any information that will say yes, asbestos is absorbed by plants, or no, it's not absorbed. So that's why I also will talk about that later. So the pathway of asbestos with soil. The most common pathway of asbestos is air, and only after that water, and only after that soil. So that the information that I'm going to tell you is not so big. So my presentation will be a little bit shorter than others. So how can asbestos be in the soil? At the first I want to say that naturally asbestos can be found in the soil. It's due to natural processes. And the other thing is the wrong demolition of buildings.
Most older homes contain an invisible hazard, but the hazard only exists during renovations or demolition. The hazard is asbestos, and the danger is breathing in the fibers when they're released into the air. One of the most common places to find asbestos is in vinyl tiled floors. The tiles contain very fine asbestos fibers. The fibers are released into the air when the tiles are cut or scraped off the floor. Whether you're a homeowner or a contractor, before you start work on any older building, test for asbestos. The wrapping on pipes and ducting is another common location for asbestos in older homes. The tape was made with asbestos fibers, and the simple act of removing it will release the fibers into the air. In older homes, drywall taping compound or drywall mud often contained asbestos. In addition to covering seams, taping compound is also used to cover holes, screws, and nails. The asbestos fibers can be released when sanding or refinishing, as well as during demolition. Drywall with sprayed-on texturing may also contain asbestos. The insulation in attics is another location asbestos can be found. Vermiculite is a lightweight, fire-resistant material used in insulating attics and walls. If you have vermiculite insulation in your home, you should assume this material is contaminated with asbestos. Asbestos disease is the #1 killer of workers in BC. If you're working on older homes, test for asbestos, and only remove it if you are trained and qualified.
So you can see that all the materials are made from the asbestos. So if during the wrong demolition that may appear on the ground, and this can be exposure to asbestos. Also, these materials are buried in the ground, what can contaminate or pollute the ground. Here is the structure. You can see that from the soil, the direct exposure is going to the children or workers who work, dig or do something related with soil. And we know that children like to eat the dirt, yeah, and that's why they can be in the danger. Also, from the soil it can turn to dust, and after that pollute the air, which will, after which the workers and residents can be exposed. And also from the soil, the asbestos can pass to the groundwater, after that to the public supply water, and it may reflect on city residents. The contamination of soil will also reflect on the biota. As we know, in the soil we grow different plants. These plants eat animals, which we eat the meat of dead animals. And as we depend on what products we eat and water that we drink, so our health is depending on everything that on the soil. And children like to eat dirt, so our future is in danger if they eat dirty ground or soil.
If we eat the meat, for example, a cow eat plants which are
Maybe the plants that cow eat, they were containing asbestos.
yeah, I mean the dust is in the plant and
No, the dust is going to the air, and only after that the workers or residents, they are exposed so with the dust, but not with, it's not related to the animals, the dust.
yeah, but if the soil contains asbestos and animals eat this soil with plants, yeah, we can get this asbestos and can cause some diseases, or it's not a problem.
I couldn't find any information that will say yes if we eat the meat of the animal who eat the plant or the ground which was with the asbestos, it will reflect on your health. And I couldn't also find any information that it will say no, there will not be any health effect. And also about the thermal exposure, I can say that it may cause only something like irritation, but nothing more.
Please can you go back to the pathways? Sorry. How could the gardeners and the subsistence population be affected?
If they, it's ingestion, if they somehow eat or ingest the soil.
How does the gardeners ingest?
Can you talk about the gardeners?
So because your colleagues, they said that there was not enough evidence that the plants actually absorb the asbestos from the soil or from the water. So we cannot assume that gardens will be exposed to.
They can be. It's not proven. There is no information. They are not exposed.
If they eat dirty fruit or vegetables, and the dirt can contain asbestos from the air. Or if, like when it comes to the soil and the asbestos particles are in the air, they may inhale the asbestos.
But doesn't the grass trap asbestos?
On the surface, or it might, of course.
Because mainly we know that, for example, from the lead, the study that they have done, they said that in the playground they used to cover it with grass because grass traps any dust that could escape. That is why if you have vegetation, I would presume that it traps any asbestos that might go to the air.
Actually, it creates a layer of isolation. It doesn't trap, but if you want to protect children from the lead contaminated soil, you create this grass layer. Then the children are playing on the grass, so they are not touching the soil. That's the main idea about lead. My question is the following. Who created this graph? Did you take it from an existing source or you developed it?
I have an example which I found in the internet. But
Example of what?
of other contamination, soil contamination.
But not
I have done
asbestos.
some- But not asbestos. But I have done some changes.
Okay, so you developed.
Yes. But I had an example from which to
Mm-hmm.
look at.
Okay. But what did you find from the literature about asbestos in soil, in the literature? Not your assumptions, only literature.
I can say that literature says that it's not the main pathway of being exposed to asbestos. So it's not a huge problem.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so no, you are evaluating only your peers, only your peers.